Adana lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts of how the news of her pregnancy would be received by the villagers. The more idea of it sent chills down her spine. But the most terrifying part was the truth. Another woman, her closest friend, was responsible. How could she ever explain that? The thought of the gossip, the judgment, and the inevitable questions filled her with dread. She couldn't sleep, haunted by the burden of this secret. After hours of restless contemplation, Adana made a decision. No one, not even Amara, needed to know the truth. The complications and the heartbreak that revelation would bring were too much to bear. She resolved to keep it to herself, protecting Amara from the confusion and pain that the truth would undoubtedly cause. It was a sacrifice, but one she felt was necessary. Meanwhile, Amara found herself growing increasingly concerned. Days had passed since she last saw Adana, and the silence was unsettling. Despite their decision to meet only outside, Amara couldn't shake the worry gnawing at her. Why hadn't Adana come to see her? What if something was wrong with her? The more she tried to push the thoughts away, the stronger they became. Finally, unable to stand the uncertainty any longer, Amara decided to go to Adana's hut. She knew the risk, how she struggled to maintain control whenever she was close to her. But her concern for her friend overpowered her fears. With her heart pounding, Amara made her way to Adana's home, anxious to find out if she was all right, yet dreading what she might discover. Adana was sleeping peacefully inside her dimly lit hut when the soft crack of the door roused her from her restless dreams. Blinking in the dim light, she saw Amara standing at the entrance. Instantly, the familiar urge of emotions flooded her. The feeling she tried so hard to bury. "Amara," Adana whispered, her voice thick with sleep and something else she couldn't quite name. She forced a smile, trying to push down the swell of emotions. "You are here." Amara smiled back, though it was tinged with worry. As she settled down beside Adana, she couldn't help but notice how pale her friend looked. "Are you all right, Adana? You look unwell. I have been worried about you," Amara said, her concern evident in her tone. Adana quickly shook her head, forcing a lightness into her voice that she didn't feel. "I'm fine, truly. Just a little tired. Nothing to worry about," she insisted, though her words did little to ease Amara's worry. As they sat together, Amara fought to keep her hands in her lap, to resist the overwhelming urge to reach out and touch Adana, to comfort her in a way that went beyond words. She clenched her hands into her fist, hoping the pressure would keep her grounded. The closeness, the familiarity of the space, it was all too much. But before she could gather her thoughts, Adana spoke again. "Amara," she began, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "There is something I have been meaning to tell you. I have heard of a powerful seer, a Dibia, who lives far across the 7 kingdoms. They say she can see the truth in all things, that her wisdom is unmatched." Amara's brow furrowed in confusion. "A seer? Why are you telling me this?" Adana hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I have been thinking, if anyone could help us understand what's happening to you, it might be her. Perhaps she could provide answers, guardians, maybe even a solution to your problems." Her eyes searched Amara's face, trying to gauge her reactions. Amara was silent for a moment, The suggestion lingering between them, the idea of a seer who could unravel the strange tangle web of emotions and circumstances surrounding them, was both intriguing and frightening. Yet, the thought of traveling so far, of exposing herself to someone else, made her uneasy. "Are you sure this Dibia can help me?" Amara's voice trembled, the fear she had kept hidden for so long now rising to the surface. "Can she really explain why I was created like this, with both male and female organs?" Adanna saw the anxiety in Amara's eyes, the fear of her secret being exposed. Gently, she reached out and took Amara's hands in hers, her touch warm and reassuring. "Yes, Amara," she said softly. "This Dibia is known for her powers. They say she can see deep into a person's lineage, their bloodline, and unravel even the most complex mystery. She can help us." The warmth of Adanna's touch sent a jolt through Amara, her heart skipping a beat. She felt the familiar stirring within her, an erection she desperately tried to suppress. But the closeness, the tenderness of the moment overwhelmed her self-control. Before she could stop herself, she found her hand moving almost on its own, sliding up to Adanna's bosom. "Amara, stop!" Adanna's voice was sharp, breaking through the haze of Amara's emotion. She pulled back slightly, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and concern. "You need to get a grip of yourself. We can't keep doing this," Adanna said to Amara. Amara froze, the reality of what she was doing crashing down on her immediately. She withdrew her hand quickly, shame flooding her. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what is wrong with me. I just can't. I can't control it anymore." Adanna's expression softened as she saw the tears in Amara's eyes. She reached out again, this time cupping Amara's face in her hands, forcing her to meet her gaze. "We will find answers, Amara," she said firmly. "But you have to stay strong. We can't let these feelings control us. We have to find a way to understand them and to control them." Amara nodded her head, trying to steady her breathing, trying to push down the emotions that threatened to consume her. "I know," she murmured, "but it's so hard, Adanna. Being near you, being around you, it's like I lose all sense of myself," Amara said. Adanna sighed, her heart aching for her friend. "Then we will find a way to keep our distance until we figure this out. And if the Dibia can help, then we will seek her out together, okay?" Amara and Adanna made a solemn pact to journey beyond the 7 mountains in search of the great seer, who was said to possess the wisdom to solve even the most perplexed of mysteries. Amara's heart was a mix of hope and fear as she prepared for the journey, driven by a deep desire to be free from what she had always considered a curse. Returning to her village, Amara decided it was time to confide in her parents. She told them everything she had learned about the seer, her plan to seek a solution, and her determination to live like a normal woman. Her parents listened in shock and fear, as Amara was their only child. The thought of her embarking on such a dangerous journey terrified them. "This journey is perilous," her father warned, his voice trembling. "The path beyond the 7 mountains is fraught and dangerous. Are you sure about this?" Amara looked at her parents with determination in her eyes. "I must go," she said firmly. "I can't continue to live like this anymore. I want to be free, to live like any other woman," she said. Seeing that her mind was made up, her parents reluctantly gave their blessings, though their hearts were heavy and worried. Meanwhile, in another part of the village, Kelechi, Amara's ex-husband, was struggling with his own demons. Since returning Amara to her father's house, he had remained silent about the truth reason for their separation. The villagers, curious and suspicious, had been trying to pry the truth from him, but Kelechi always dismissed them with a vague response. But that fateful day, Kelechi found himself in the palm wine tapas bar, drowning his sorrows in drink. As the night wore on and the alcohol loosened his tongue, he began to sing like a bird. "My ex-wife," he slurred. "She's a monster. She has both male and female organs." He laughed. The men in the bar laughed at first, dismissing his words as drunken ramblings. But one of them, an older man, leaned forward and said to them, "A drunk man often reveals his deepest secrets. We should take heed. We should listen to him." The men exchanged uneasy glances, and though they said nothing more that night, the words weighed heavily on their minds. The next morning, the rumor spread like wildfire. Wives whispered to each other in the market, sharing the shocking news their husband had told them in the night. Soon, the entire village was buzzing with talk of Amara's supposed curse. As Amara went about her day, she noticed the strange looks and hushed whispers, but thought nothing of it. She had no idea that her most closely guarded secret was now common knowledge. The village elders, troubled by the rumors, gathered in secret. They summoned Kelechi and demanded the truth. With a resigned sigh, Kelechi confirmed the story. The elders were deeply disturbed. Their village had been plagued with misfortune, failed crops, sick animals, and unrest among the people. And now, they believed they had found the cause. "This cause must be eliminated," one elder declared, his voice filled with fear and anger. The gods are angry. The gods are angry, and they will not bless us as long as she remains in our midst. She is a curse." The others nodded in agreement, their faces grim. They began to discuss how they might rid the village of what they now saw as a curse, not realizing that Amara was already preparing to leave in search of her own salvation. Kelechi sat quietly in the corner of the elders' meeting, his heart heavy with guilt and fear. As the elders spoke of eliminating Amara to rid the village of what they believed was a curse, Kelechi's mind was in turmoil. He still loved Amara deeply, despite the fear and confusion that had driven him to abandon her. The memory of their wedding night, the shock of discovering her secret, had haunted him ever since then. But now, faced with the reality of what the village intended to do, Kelechi felt an overwhelming need to protect her. The elder's voice droned on, discussing plans to quietly remove Amara before the situation worsened. Kelechi's heart raced. He knew he couldn't let this happen. The thought of Amara being harmed because of something she couldn't control was unbearable. As the meeting came to an end, Kelechi rose slowly, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He couldn't stay silent any longer. He had to warn her. That night, as darkness fell over the village, Kelechi made his way to Amara's home. The shadow seemed to close in around him, and every rustle of leaves made his heart skip a beat. He knew he was taking a great risk by going to her, but he couldn't live with himself if he didn't try to save her. When he arrived at Amara's home, he hesitated for a moment, then knocked softly on the door. Amara opened it, surprised to see him standing there. The look of fear and sadness in his eyes caught her off guard. "Kelechi," she whispered, her voice tinged with both curiosity and concern. "What are you doing here by this time of the night?" Kelechi stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind him. "Amara," he began, his voice trembling, "I am here to warn you. The elders, they are planning something terrible. They think you are the reason the village is suffering, and they want to eliminate you." Amara's eyes widened in shock. "What? Why would they think of a thing like that?" Kelechi looked down, ashamed. "It's my fault. I was drunk, and I said things I shouldn't have. The villagers found out about your condition, and now they believe you are cursed. I'm sorry, Amara. I never meant for this to happen like this." Amara's heart sank. The very thing she had feared all her life was now coming to pass right in front of her. She had always known that her secrets could destroy her, but hearing it from Kelechi made it all the more real. "What do I do now? What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to leave the village immediately," Kelechi urged, his eyes pleading with her. "Tonight, you have to leave. You can't sleep over here. It's not safe. Go and look for help. Find a dibia, find a seer, anyone, but you must leave now before it's too late." Amara nodded her head, her mind racing. She knew Kelechi was right. The village she had called home her entire life had turned against her, and staying would only mean certain death for her. With a heavy heart, she began to gather her things, knowing that she might never see this place again. Kelechi watched her, feeling a deep sense of loss. He knew that once she left, everything between them would be over. But he also knew that this was the only way to save her. As Amara prepared to leave, Kelechi took her hand. His voice choked with emotions. "I'm so sorry, Amara. I never meant to hurt you. I hope you find what you are looking for." Amara looked into his eyes, seeing the pain and regret etched on his face. Despite everything, she still cared for him. But there was no time for words of comfort. "Please, tell my friend Adanna that I have gone to see the seer. Also tell her to take care of my parents," she said as she squeezed his hands, then turned and walked out into the night, determined to find the seer and hopefully a way to finally be at peace with herself. As soon as Amara slipped away into the night, Kelechi began to make his way back home. But as he reached the edge of her family's compound, he noticed torchlights flickering in the distance. His heart sank as he realized what was happening. The village youth were coming for Amara. Quickly, Kelechi ducked behind a large tree and peeped out cautiously. The group of young men, led by a very young leader, approached Amara's hut, their voices raised in angry chants. Amara's parents, hearing the commotion, rushed out of the hut, their faces pale with fear and confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" her father demanded, though his voice were trembling. "Bring out your cursed daughter, Amara," the youth leader shouted in unison, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and superstition. Her mother clutched her chest, shaking her head frantically. "She is not cursed. She is our daughter. What do you want with her?" The youth leader, tall and intimidating, pushed past the elderly couple with little regard. She has brought suffering upon our land. We demand justice. Step aside, old man." Despite their fear, Amara's parents bravely blocked the doorway, their frail bodies standing as the only barrier between the mob and the empty house. "You will not harm our daughter," her father shouted, though he was trembling. But the youth leader, fueled by the fervor of the crowd, roughly yanked them aside, sending them stumbling on the ground. With a loud war cry, the youth rushed into the hut, overturning furniture and searching every corner. They tore through the compound, checking every nook and cranny, their frustration growing with each passing moment. But Amara was nowhere to be found. The youth leader, realizing that their target had escaped, led the group back outside. "She's gone," he spat, his voice dripping with frustration. "But we will find her, and when we do, she will pay for the curse she has brought upon this land." With that, the group turned and marched away, their chants fading in the distance. Amara's parents, still trembling with fear, collapsed in front of their home, overwhelmed with relief that their daughter had not been found, but deeply anxious about where she might be and what danger she might face. From his hiding spot, Kelechi watched the entire scene unfold, his heart pounding in his chest. He stayed hidden until the mob was out of sight, then quietly slipped away, running back to his own home under the cover of darkness. His thoughts were a jumble of fear for Amara and guilt for his role in what had happened. The next morning, Kelechi returned to Amara's hut. Her parents, still shaking, were surprised to see him. Before they could ask questions, Kelechi confessed everything. How he had overheard the youth planning the attack, how he had warned Amara in time for her to escape, and how he had witnessed the search that night. Amara's mother wept with gratitude as her father clasped Kelechi's hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have saved our daughter's life. May the gods watch over her and protect her on her journey." Kelechi nodded his head. Though he felt no relief, he knew the danger was far from over, and he could only hope that Amara would find the answers she sought before the village rat caught up with her. Amara fled deeper into the forest, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She could hear the echoes of the village chant in the distance, but she pushed forward, driven by the desperate need to be free. As she crossed the 7 mountains, her body ached and her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Yet she pressed on, knowing that turning back was not an option. Eventually, Amara reached a small cave nestled deep within the mountain. The entrance was hidden by thick vines and twisted roots, but she felt a pull guiding her towards it. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, her eyes adjusting to the dim light. There, sitting on a stone throne, was the great seer Ijele, a woman whose reputations preceded her. A seer who was said to dine with the gods themselves. Amara's heart raced as she approached Ijele, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. She greeted the seer with deep respect and humility, bowing her head before her. Ijele nodded, her gaze piercing and knowing. "I have been waiting for you, Amara," Ijele said, her voice echoing softly in the cave. "From the moment you arrived on this earth, I have known you would come to me," Ijele said. Amara stared at the seer, confusion clouding her thoughts. How can that be possible, she thought, trying to comprehend what Ijele was saying. But before she could voice her confusion, Ijele answered her unspoken questions. "You are here because of the burden you carry," Ijele continued, her voice calm and assured. "The burden of being born with both male and female organs," Ijele said. Amara gasped, her eyes widened in shock. How could the seer know such a secret? But then she remembered. Oh, this was Ijele, the great seer who could see beyond the veil of the physical world. Her fear deepened as she realized the extent of Ijele's powers. "Come, sit." Ijele gestured to a woven mat on the ground. "I have a story to tell you." Amara hesitated, then slowly sat down, her body tense with anticipation. She watched the seer closely, her mind racing with questions. Ijele began her tale. "Long ago, there was a barren woman named Egodi, married to a good man in the village. She sought a cure for her barrenness, visiting every native herbalist in the land. But despite all the herbs and the rituals, she remained without child. Her husband, though patient at first, eventually remarried another woman who bore him children." Amara listened intently, her heart aching with the sorrow in the seer's words. "One night," Ijele continued, "Egodi was bathing under the moonlight, as instructed by one of the herbalists she had visited. But the second wife, filled with envy and malice, saw her and raised a false alarm. The villagers, fueled by fear and superstition, gathered and accused Egodi of witchcraft, claiming that she had devoured all the children in her womb. They dragged her to the village boundary and killed her." Amara's breath caught in her throat as she imagined the horror of Egodi's fate. With her dying breath, Ijele said, as she continued the story, "Egodi swore that she would return to the earth and to that village and have a child of her own, whether as a man or a woman. And so she was reborn through you, Amara." Amara's eyes widened in disbelief. Egodi was reborn as me? I am the reincarnation of Egodi," she whispered, the realization dawning on her. The burden she had carried all her life, the confusion, the pain, it all began to make sense. "Yes," Ijele confirmed. "Egodi's soul returned, determined not to take chances. That is why you were born with both male and female organs, so that in this life she has come, Egodi would finally experience the fullness of creation, either as a man or as a woman." Amara's mind spun with the revelation. The mysteries of life, of her life, were unraveling before her eyes. "I understand now," she said, her voice trembling. "But I want to be free. I want to live like a normal woman. Is there a way out? Is there any way you can help me, great Ijele?" Ijele looked deep into Amara's eyes, her expression serious. "You must choose, Amara. Will you take the form of a man or the form of a woman? You cannot be both." Amara thought long and hard, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She considered everything she had been through, but she worried. What if she is more active as a man than as a woman? What if she decides to be a woman and she won't give birth anymore? What if being a man will fulfill the wishes of her reincarnation? The thoughts confused her as she worried. "I choose to be a woman," she finally said, her voice firm. "I have more features of a woman, and I wish to live as one." Ijele nodded her head as if she had expected this choice. "Very well. The ritual will begin now, but it will not be an easy one. You must be strong." For 4 days and 4 nights, corresponding to the 4 market days, Eke, Orie, Afo, and Nkwo, Ijele performed the ritual. She chanted incantations and mixed sacred herbs and invoked the spirits of the ancestors and the god of creation. Amara laid on the cold stone floor of the cave, unconscious, her body racked with pain as the ritual progressed. On the final day, as the sun began to rise, Ijele completed the incantation and prayers to the god of creations. Amara, exhausted and weak, opened her eyes as Ijele whispered the final words. She felt different and lighter, as if she had been reborn. Slowly, she reached down, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached down as she touched her manhood. The burden she had carried all her life was gone. It was gone. It is gone. Tears filled her eyes as she realized the enormity of what had just happened. "I am free," she said as she cried. Back in the village, chaos reigned. The village chief priest was furious with the elders for taking actions without consulting him. "You fools," he roared. "The girl you tried to kill was the cure to our troubled land." The elders, now filled with regret, listened as the chief priest revealed the truth. Amara is the reincarnated soul of Egode, the barren woman who was wrongfully accused and stoned to death years ago at the boundary of our village. Only her forgiveness can cleanse our land and restore peace. "Why did you take such decision without involving me?" the chief priest said to them angrily. The elders, shocked and ashamed, ordered the youth to search for Amara, but she was nowhere to be found. As the search continued, Amara's parents, Kelechi and Adanna, who had come over to help Amara's parents and is now visibly pregnant, kept their knowledge of her whereabouts a secret. They feared that revealing the truth would only lead to more harm. Meanwhile, Adanna silently vowed to take the secret of her pregnancy to the grave. She knew the villagers would never understand the truth, and she was determined to protect Amara at all costs. In the forest, Amara emerged from the cave, feeling as if she had been reborn, lighter and happier. The burden that had weighed her down for so long was finally lifted. She looked up at the sky, a sense of peace washing over her. As Amara prepared to leave, Ijele called her back, her voice carrying a weight of ancient wisdom. "Amara," she began, "there is something more you need to know. The curse that plagued your land was placed there by Egode herself. The harsh judgment and brutal way in which the villagers killed her led her to lay a curse upon the land. Only you, as her reincarnation, have the power to forgive the people and lift the curse." Ijele handed Amara a small vial filled with a mysterious liquid. "Pour this on the boundary of your village," she instructed. "It will cleanse the innocent blood and signal your forgiveness." Amara took the vial, her heart heavy with the responsibility, but she was determined to do what was necessary. She thanked Ijele for her help and began the journey back to her village. When Amara got to her village, to the boundary. She carefully poured the liquid on the ground, watching as it seeped into the earth. As she crossed into her village, a sense of renewal washed over her. She felt lighter, freer, as though the weight of her past had been lifted. She couldn't help but laugh at the realization her manhood was no longer there. It was truly gone. As she walked through the villagers began to notice her return. Their face lit up with joy and relief. They cheered and gathered around her, hugging her and singing in celebration. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of hope and renewal as Amara, now fully a woman, made her way home to her father's compound. When she arrived at her father's compound, the villagers had already gathered outside. Her parents, hearing the commotion, rushed out to see what was happening. Their eyes widened with disbelief and then overflow with tears of joy when they saw their daughter standing before them. They embraced her, their hearts filled with relief and gratitude. Amara, her voice trembling with emotion, said, "The manhood is gone. It is gone. I am now free. I am now a woman." Tears streaming down her face as she shared the news with her parents and the gathered villagers. The crowd erupted in cheers, their joy palpable as they celebrated Amara's transformation. Amidst the jubilation, Adanna, who has been helping Amara's parents since she embarked on her journey, emerged from the back of the hut. Amara's eyes widened in shock when she saw her friends visibly pregnant. Adanna, smiling brightly, approached Amara and hugged her tightly. Amara, still surprised, hugged her back, noticing something different within her. She no longer felt the confusing urge that had once tormented her life. A deep sense of peace settled in her heart as she hugged her best friend, Adanna. As the crowd began to disperse, the elders and the chief priest arrived. They approached Amara, their face solemn with guilt and remorse. Bowing their heads, they asked for her forgiveness, apologizing for the pain and suffering they had caused her. Amara, understanding the depth of their regret, responded with grace. "I have already forgiven you all," she said, her voice calm and full of resolve. "Let the past be the past. We must move forward to our glorious future." Later, when the villagers had all gone, Amara took Adanna to the back of the hut, her curiosity getting the better of her. "Adanna," she asked softly, "how did you get pregnant? Why didn't you tell me?" Adanna laughed lightly, trying to brush off the question. "I met someone," she said, her tone casual. "We have been seeing each other for a while now. And well, things just happened and here I am, pregnant." She laughed. Amara wasn't entirely convinced. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you not mention it all this while if you have been in a relationship with a man?" Adanna's expression softened. "You were going through so much, Amara. I didn't want to add to your burden with any of my troubles." Amara stared at her friend, torn between relief and suspicion. But Adanna reassured her, smiling warmly. "I am fine, Amara. Everything is as it should be. I am fine. Don't worry about me." Amara hugged her friend, grateful for her support, though a small part of her still wondered about the truth her friend just told her. The next day, Kelechi came to visit Amara. His face lit up with joy when he saw her alive and well. "Amara," he said, his voice filled with emotions. "I am so happy you survived everything." Amara thanked him for saving her life, her heart filled with gratitude. Kelechi, his eyes earnest, asked her for forgiveness, and Amara, understanding the depth of his pain and confusion, forgave him. Overcome with emotions, Kelechi then asked Amara to be his wife once more. Amara hesitated, her mind clouded with doubt. But Adanna, ever the voice of reason, encouraged her. "Forgive him, Amara," she urged. "Give him and yourself a second chance to love and life." Moved by her friend's words, Amara agreed. She forgave Kelechi and married him again. This time, their marriage was blessed. Amara soon became pregnant, her heart overflowing with joy and gratitude to the gods. She thanked the gods every day for giving her a chance at life and a chance to create life. Meanwhile, Adanna gave birth to a healthy baby boy, but she never revealed the identity of the child's father to anyone, keeping that a secret close to her heart, not even to Amara. Despite the mystery, she was content, and so was Amara, who went on to have many children with Kelechi. Amara's life, once filled with confusion and pain, was now a life of happiness and fulfillment. The curse on the land was lifted, and peace returned to the village. Amara had not only freed herself from her past, but had also brought healing to her people, and in the end, she lived a long and happy life, surrounded by her loving family and the villagers who had once feared her. In a small village nestled in the heart of Africa, there was a girl named Amara. From the moment she was born, her parents knew she was different. Amara had both male and female organs, a secret her parents kept hidden from everyone, even from Amara herself. They feared what the villagers might say or do if they found out. So they raised Amara as a girl, teaching her to be gentle, to help her mother with chores, and to play with the other girls in the village. As Amara grew older, she noticed that she wasn't like the other girls. She felt different, not just in her body, but in her heart also. She didn't understand why she sometimes wanted to join the boys in their games, climbing trees and hunting birds. But her mother always scolded her and told her to act like a lady. Confused and hurt, Amara tried to fit in, but the more she tried, the more she felt out of place. One day, while playing with other girls, they decided to urinate. But Amara's urine sometimes comes out either through the female organ or the male organ. On that particular day, the urine came out through the male organ. Her friends saw that and started laughing and pointing at her. When Amara got home, she was crying as she narrated the incident to her mother. She asked her mother, "Is anything wrong with me?" The mother held her and consoled her with reassurance of how special she is. She also warned her not to tell anyone about it. Amara grew into a very beautiful woman, developing all the female traits and male traits too. She had a vagina and a penis. She also developed well-rounded breasts. She was so scared to associate with people. While going to the market one day, Amara met a young man named Kelechi. He was strong and kind, and he made Amara laugh like no one else. They quickly became friends, spending every day together. But as they grew closer, Amara's secret became harder to keep. She feared that if Kelechi found out, he would hate her, just like her mother had warned her. Amara's parents began to worry about how close she was getting to Kelechi. They knew that soon Kelechi might ask to marry her, and then what would they do? They couldn't keep the secret forever. They tried to keep Amara away from Kelechi, sending her on long errands and giving her extra chores, but nothing could keep the two friends apart. One evening, as the sun was setting, Kelechi walked Amara home from the market. They stopped by a large bamboo tree, and Kelechi took Amara's hand. "Amara," he said softly, "I want to marry you." Amara's heart raced. She wanted to say yes immediately, more than anything, but she knew she couldn't. She pulled her hand away and ran home, tears streaming down her face. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She cried herself to sleep, wondering why she had to be born this way. The next morning, Amara's mother found her in bed, eyes swollen from crying. "What's wrong, my daughter?" she asked, though she already knew. Amara hesitated, then blurted out, "Kelechi asked me to marry him, but I can't. I am not like the other girls, Mama. I am not normal," she said. Her mother's face grew stern. "Amara, listen to me. You are special, but you must never tell anyone your secret. If Kelechi truly loves you, he will marry you without knowing. You must be careful, or you will bring shame upon our family." Amara nodded her head, but deep down she felt a storm brewing. How could she marry Kelechi and keep such a big secret? How could she live a lie for the rest of her life? Despite her fears, Amara continued to see Kelechi. They laughed and talked as if nothing had changed. But the weight of her secret grew heavier each day. One evening, as they sat by the river, Kelechi noticed Amara's sadness. "What is wrong?" he asked, concern in his voice. Amara forced a smile. "Nothing, Kelechi, I'm just tired." But Kelechi wouldn't be convinced. He took her hand again, this time holding it firmly. "Amara, I love you and I want to make you happy. Please tell me what is bothering you." Amara looked into his eyes and felt a pang of guilt. She wanted to tell him everything immediately, to free herself from the burden, but fear held her back. Instead, she whispered, "I'm just afraid, Kelechi. Afraid of what the future holds." Kelechi pulled her close and hugged her tightly. "Don't be afraid, Amara. We will face it together, whatever it is," he assured her. As Amara rested her head on Kelechi's shoulder, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, everything will be okay. But deep down, she knew that the storm was coming, and when it hit, it would change everything. The day of the wedding came quickly. Amara's parents prepared her for the ceremony, dressing her in a beautiful gown adorned with beads and shells. She looked stunning, but inside she was trembling with fear. She still hadn't told Kelechi the truth. and now it was too late. She had to go through with it. The wedding was a grand affair, with the whole village gathered to celebrate. Drums beat loudly and dancers twirled in colorful skirts as Amara and Kelechi received their blessings from her father. As they did, Amara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had promised to be his wife, but she knew she couldn't be what he expected. That night, after the celebration had ended and the villagers had gone home, Kelechi took Amara to their new hut. He was gentle and kind, but Amara could sense his anticipation. She knew what was expected of her, but she was terrified. She tried to delay, making excuses and pretending to be tired. But Kelechi was patient. He didn't push her, but his eyes were full of longing. Finally, Amara couldn't avoid it any longer. She knew she had to tell him the truth. With a trembling voice, she said, "Kelechi, there is something you need to know." Kelechi looked at her, his smile fading. "What is it, Amara?" Tears filled Amara's eyes as she whispered, "I am not like the other women. I was born different." Kelechi frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean, Amara?" Amara took a deep breath and revealed her secret. She explained everything from her birth to the struggle she had faced growing up. When she finished, she looked at Kelechi, waiting for his reaction. For a moment, there was silence. Then, Kelechi's face twisted with shock and anger. "Why didn't you tell me before now?" he shouted, his voice filled with betrayal. "You lied to me, Amara. How could you?" Amara tried to reach out to him, but he pushed her away. "Don't touch me," he yelled at her. "You have brought shame upon me. I can't believe this. I really can't believe that I married you." Amara's heart shattered. She had feared this moment for so long, and now it was happening. Kelechi stormed out of the hut, leaving Amara alone, sobbing uncontrollably. She had lost everything: her husband, her happiness, and her hope of becoming a mother. The days that followed were filled with pain. Kelechi refused to speak to Amara, and the villagers began to whisper. Rumors spread like wildfire. What is happening? After Kelechi stormed out of the hut that fateful night, Amara feared the worst, and the worst came through when the next days that followed, Kelechi returned Amara to her parents. His face was hardened with anger and disgust, and he refused to even look at her. "This woman is a curse," Kelechi spat, his voice echoing through the small compound. "She deceived me and brought shame upon me and my household. I demand the bride price I paid on her head be returned immediately." Amara's parents stood in stern silence. They have feared this day might come, but the reality of it was far worse than they imagined. Her father hesitated for a moment, but the look in Kelechi's eyes left no room for negotiation. He knew there was no way to salvage the marriage now. With a heavy heart, he agreed to return the bride price. Amara stood by, feeling like a ghost in her own home. The shame of being rejected by her husband just few days after marriage and return to her parents was unbearable. She wanted to scream, to cry out that it wasn't her fault, but the words stuck in her throat. She watched as her father counted out the cowries that Kelechi had paid for her head, each one a reminder of the life she had lost. When the transaction was done, Kelechi turned and walked away without a word. Amara's mother took her by the arm and led her into the house, away from the eyes of the curious neighbors. The door shut behind them, and Amara collapsed to the floor, her body racked with sob. The days that followed were a blur of pain and isolation. Amara refused to leave the house, too ashamed to face the villagers. Though Kelechi had only told the people that she was cursed, the whisper and question began to spread. The villagers were curious and worried, wondering why a husband would return his wife so quickly after marriage. They began to gather outside her parents' home, trying to catch a glimpse of the girl they now considered cursed. Amara's parents were at a loss. They had tried to protect her all her life, but now they didn't know how to help her anymore. They urged her to stay indoors, to avoid the gossip and the stares, but they knew it wasn't a long-term solution. Life had to go on. Amara's mother, Neka, decided to send her on a trip to other village to sell goods. She thought the change of scenery might do Amara some good, and it would give her a reason to leave the house without facing the judgment of their own villagers. Reluctantly, Amara agreed, though the idea of venturing out filled her with dread. As Amara began traveling to other villages, she met many different people. Some were kind, others different. But most did not know her story, and that brought her some comfort. She focused on her work, selling her mother's goods, and tried to push the memories of her failed marriage out of her mind. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape her own body. Something strange began to happen to Amara during those trips. She started noticing feelings within herself that she had never experienced before. Whenever she was around other women, especially those who were kind to her, she felt a strange sensation in her body. It was as if her male organ was responding in a way she didn't understand. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking it was just a passing discomfort. But the feelings grew stronger with each encounter. One day, while selling in a village market far from her own, Amara met a woman named Adana. She was a widow, strong and independent, with a warm smile that made Amara feel at ease. They spent the afternoon together, talking and laughing as they walked through the market. But as the day went on, Amara began to feel that strange sensation again. Her heart raced, and she felt a tightening in her chest that she couldn't explain. When they stopped to rest under a tree, Adana placed a hand on Amara's arm and smiled at her. "You are a good woman, Amara," she said softly. "I am glad we met today." The warmth of Adana's touch sent a jolt through Amara's body. She felt an erection forming, and panic set in. She quickly pulled away, mumbling an excuse about needing to get back home, and hurried off before Adana could ask her any question. As Amara walked back to her village, her mind was a whirlwind of confusion and fear. What was happening to her? Why did she feel this way around other women? She had always been told that men were supposed to feel this way about women, but she had never imagined that she, with her unique body, would experience these feelings. When she returned home, she locked herself in her room, unable to face her parents or anyone else. She was more confused and frightened than ever. The secret she had tried so hard to keep was becoming more difficult to hide, not just from others, but from herself. Amara knew she couldn't keep running from what was happening. But how could she confront something she didn't even understand? The storm inside her was growing, and she had no idea how to stop it. Amara was lost in her thoughts as she lay on her mat that night, staring up at the thatched roof of her room. Her mind swelled with so much questions. Why was this happening now? Just when she was beginning to piece together the broken fragments of her life, this new and strange feeling had emerged, shaking her to her core. Everything she had heard about what happens to a man when he has feelings for someone seemed to be happening to her now. The quickening heartbeat, the strange, intense sensation in her male organ, the way her thoughts drifted to Adana even when she tried to push them away. It was all too much for her to understand. This can't be happening to me, Amara whispered to herself, pressing her palms against her forehead. Why now? When I was just starting to move on, why now? She said to herself. Despite her worries, Amara tried to ignore what she was feeling. She convinced herself that it was just a moment of weakness, a fleeting sensation that would soon pass. She had to focus on her work, on helping her mother, and on putting the pieces of her life back together. The next day, Amara gathered her wares and made her way to the market in the neighboring village, determined to put the previous day's confusion behind her. As she set up her stall, she repeated to herself that today would be just another day of business, that nothing strange would happen, and that she would get through it. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its warm light over the hustling market, Amara saw a familiar face approaching. It was Adana, the widow she had met the other day before. Adana's heart skipped a beat, and she felt a rush of emotions she wasn't ready to confront. Adana's expression was soft, but there was a hint of worry in her eyes as she walked up to Amara's stall. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. Amara, I hope I am not disturbing you, she began, her voice gentle. I have been thinking about yesterday, and I wanted to make sure I didn't do anything to upset you. You left so suddenly, and I was worried that I might have offended you in some type of way. Amara's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected Adana to come back. And now, standing face to face with her, she didn't know how to respond. Feelings she had tried to ignore were building up again, and she felt that strange sensation in her body. Oh, no, you didn't offend me, Amara stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. I just had to leave early. That's all. It wasn't anything you did. Adana looked at her closely, as if trying to read the truth in her eyes. Are you sure? You seemed so happy before, and then suddenly, you look different. I just wanted to make sure I didn't do anything wrong. Amara shook her head, forcing a smile. I am fine, really. You don't need to worry. But Adana didn't seem convinced. She reached out and gently took Amara's hand, her touch sending another wave of confusing emotions through Amara's body. You can tell me anything if something is bothering you, Amara. Adana said softly, "I consider you a friend, Amara, and I care about you." Amara's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to pull her hand away, to run and hide from what she was feeling, but something in Adana's kindness made her stay. It was as if she was caught in a current, being pulled in a direction she didn't understand. I am just going through some things," Amara finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's nothing you need to worry. I'll be fine," she said to Adana. Adana gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We all go through difficult times, Amara, but you don't have to go through them alone. If you ever want to talk, or if you need anything, I am here for you." Amara looked into Adana's eyes and felt a warmth that both comforted and terrified her. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded her head, hoping that would be enough. As the day went on, Adana stayed by Amara's side, helping her with her sales and chatting with her about small and everyday things. Amara found herself laughing at Adana's joke and feeling more at ease. But the confusion inside her only grew. She didn't deny the attraction she felt, an attraction that didn't make sense to her, and it scared her. When the day finally came to an end and the market began to close, Adana walked with Amara to the edge of the village. "Thank you for letting me spend the day with you," Adana said with a smile. "I hope I will see you again soon." Amara nodded her head, though her mind was a whirlwind of thought as she watched Adana walk away, disappearing into the fading light. She felt a deep sense of loss, as if something precious was slipping through her fingers. But more than that, she felt a gnawing fear. What was happening to her? Why was she feeling this way? And most importantly, what would she do if these feelings didn't go away? As Amara made her way back to her village, the sun settling behind her, she knew that her life was becoming more complicated than she had ever imagined. The storm that had once been on the horizon was now upon her, and she had no idea how to weather it. The day Amara dreaded and anticipated in equal measure finally arrived. Adana, who had become her close friend, invited her to spend time at her home. Adana lived alone in a small, modest hut at the edge of her town village. Her husband had died just few months after they were married, and they had no children together. Since his death, the villagers had whispered behind Adana's back, calling her bad luck, blaming her for not conceiving before her husband passed away, and even blaming her for killing her husband. Even the men of her community avoided her, believing her presence could bring misfortune. Loneliness had wrapped itself around Adana like a heavy cloak, making her days long and her nights even longer, like a clock, making her days long and her nights even longer. Amara was the first friend she had made in a long time, the first person who didn't treat her like an outcast. That's why she invited Amara over to share a few moments of companionship, to laugh and to forget, if only for a little while, the pain of being alone. When Amara arrived, Adana welcomed her warmly. She had prepared some food and brought out a calabash of fresh palm wine, its sweet, heavy aroma filling the small room. The two women sat together, eating, drinking, and talking about anything and everything. They laughed about the antics of market women, shared stories of their childhood, and for a while, it felt like all the troubles of the world had melted away. But as the evening wore on, Amara began to feel the familiar unease growing inside her. The feelings she had tried so hard to suppress. The burning desire that flared up whenever she was close to Adana were becoming impossible to ignore. She felt it like a fire inside her, one that she was desperately trying to control. But the palm wine had loosened her inhibition, and the fire was becoming more intense, more consuming. Amara's heart pounded in her chest as she found herself staring at Adana, her eyes tracing the lines of her face, the curve of her neck. She couldn't stop herself. She reached out and touched Adana's arm, her fingers trembling as they made contact. At first, Adana didn't understand what was happening. She felt Amara's touch and thought maybe it was just the wine making her more affectionate. But when Amara's hand lingered, when the touch became more insistent, Adana's smile faltered. Amara, what are you doing? She asked, her voice unsure. But Amara didn't answer. She couldn't. The fire inside her had taken over her, and she was no longer in control of her actions. She touched Adana again, this time more boldly, her hand sliding up Adana's arm and moving closer to her underneath. She was wanting more. Adana's heart raced, a mixture of confusion and fear gripping her. Amara, stop! Stop! What are you doing? What is wrong with you? But Amara didn't stop. She couldn't stop. The feelings she had kept hidden for so long were overwhelming her, driving her forward. And Adana, who had also had too much to drink, found herself caught up in the moment, unable to resist the intensity of what was happening. The desire in the room was thick as they collided, engulfing both of them in a whirlwind of emotion and physical need as she penetrated Adana. Before either of them fully realized what was happening, the two women had crossed a line that neither of them had ever imagined crossing. They lay together, consumed by the fire that had been ignited, their action driven by a force they didn't understand. When the heat of the moment finally subsided, they lay still, the reality of what had happened slowly sinking in. Amara was the first to wake up, her mind slowly coming back to her senses as she opened her eyes and looked at Adana laying beside her. Horror rushed over her like a cold wave. What? What have I done? Amara whispered, her voice trembling with fear and shame. She pulled away from Adana, scrambling to sit up, her heart pounding in her chest. Adana stared and opened her eyes. The moment she realized what had happened, she bolted upright, a look of pure terror on her face. Amara, what are you? What have you done? She screamed, backing away from Amara as if she were a wild animal. Amara couldn't hold back the tears. They streamed down her face as if she tried to find the words to explain. But nothing she could say would make this right. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I am so sorry, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I didn't mean to. I don't know what came over me. I think I am cursed. Adanna stared at her, her mind reeling. She had never heard of anything like this before, had never imagined such a thing could happen. The fear in her eyes was mixed with confusion and a growing sense of sympathy. Amara, shaking with emotion, knew she couldn't keep her secret any longer, not after what just happened and what they have shared. So through her tears, she began to tell Adanna the story of her life. She told her about being born with both male and female organs, about the shame she had carried all her life, and how she had tried so hard to hide it from everyone, including herself. She told her about her failed marriages to Kelechi, about how he had rejected her and when he found out the truth, and how she had been living in fear ever since. Adanna listened, her initial horror slowly giving way to a deep sympathy for Amara. She had never heard of such a thing before, and she could hardly imagine the burden Amara had carried all these years. She reached out, taking Amara's hand in hers, her voice gentle but firm. Amara, I don't know what to say. Adanna began, her own emotions welling inside her. I have never heard of anything like this before, but I can see how much you have suffered. You are not cursed, Amara. You are just different. And I don't know what this means or what we should do, but I do know that you are not alone in this. Amara looked up at Adanna, her eyes filled with tears. You don't hate me? No, Adanna whispered, shaking her head. I don't hate you. I am scared, yes, and I am confused, but I don't hate you. I can't imagine how hard this must have been for you, but we will figure out something together. We will find a solution to this problem and end it once and for all. Okay? For the first time in a long time, Amara felt a glimmer of hope. She didn't know what the future would hold, but she knew she couldn't face it alone. And now, with Adanna by her side, maybe she wouldn't have to face life alone. But deep down, she still feared what she was becoming and what this strange growing desire inside her meant. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, and the storm inside her was far from over. Amara sat by the riverbank one day, watching the water flow gently, but her thoughts were anything but calm. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, and the weight of her reality was becoming so much to bear. She had always dreamed of a simple, happy life, a life where she would get married to a loving man she loved, have children, and live a peaceful life. But these dreams were slipping away, replaced by a terrifying new reality. It was clear to Amara now that the male part of her was becoming more dominant, pushing aside the femininity she had always embraced. She could feel it in the way her desire had shifted, in the way her body reacted to things that used to make her blush. It was as if she was losing control of herself, and it terrified her. The incident with Adanna had shaken her to her core. She had always thought of herself as a woman, even with her secrets. But what happened that night when she had lost control and acted on feelings she didn't fully understand, made her question everything about herself. The shame she felt afterward was overwhelming, and she couldn't help but feel like her life was crumbling before her eyes. Adanna, ever the loyal friend, had been a source of comfort and support. She assured Amara that they would find a solution, that they wouldn't stop until they had fixed whatever was happening to her. Adanna had even started making a list of herbalists and strong seers that they would visit, hoping that somewhere, somehow, someone would have the answer they needed. But despite Adanna's reassurance, the atmosphere between them had changed. They both pretend that nothing had happened that night, avoiding any mention of it as they focus on their search for a cure. Yet the memory lingered in the air between them, unspoken but heavy, making their once easy companionship feel strained and awkward. One morning, Adanna woke up feeling unusual unwell. She tried to shake it off, thinking it was the stress and worry getting to her. But as the days passed, her discomfort grew worse. Eventually, she decided to visit a well-known herbalist in the village, hoping to find some relief. The herbalist, an elderly woman with deep lines etched in her face, examined Adanna carefully. She took her time, her hands moving over Adanna's body with practiced precision, her brow furrowing as she concentrated. After what felt like an eternity, the herbalist stepped back, a look of surprise on her face. "My dear," she said slowly, "you're with child." Adanna blinked in confusion, not understanding what the herbalist was saying. "What do you mean, with child?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. The herbalist smiled gently as if trying to soften the blow of her words. "You are pregnant, my dear. You are going to have a baby." Adanna let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That's impossible. I haven't been with any man. How could I have been pregnant? Mama, what are you saying?" But the herbalist only nodded, her expression serious. "I know it may seem impossible, but the signs are clear. You're carrying a child." Adanna's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. She knew the herbalist was well respected, her knowledge of herbs and that of the human body unmatched. But this couldn't be true. It just couldn't. Then, like a bolt of lightning, the memory of that night with Amara came crashing back. Her heart skipped a beat, her breath catching in her throat as she recalled every detail. The way Amara had touched her, the intensity of their connection, the confusion and fear that had followed. "Oh my goodness, no!" Adanna whispered, her face growing pale as the realization dawned on her. "No, it can't be. No!" The herbalist, sensing Adanna's distress, reached out to steady her. "Is there something you're not telling me, my child? Sometimes things happen that we can't explain, but the truth has a way of coming to light." Adanna shook her head, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and commotion. Could it really be possible? Could what happened that night with Amara had resulted in this? It didn't make any sense. Nothing about this is making sense. But deep down, she couldn't deny what she was feeling, the tiny spark of life growing inside her. She left the herbalist's home in a daze, her thoughts racing, her heart pounding in her chest as she walked through the village. She could barely keep herself from collapsing. What is this? She couldn't believe it, didn't want to believe it, but the truth was staring in her face. When she finally reached her home, she sat down, her hands trembling as she tried to make sense of everything. She thought of Amara, of the pain and confusion her friend was going through and the horror of what this would mean for both of them. How could she tell Amara? How could she even begin to explain this to people? And what would happen if the villagers found out? They would surely see this as a curse, something unnatural and wicked. Adana's heart ached with fear, sadness, confusion. She had finally found a friend in Amara, and now this terrible secret threatened to destroy everything.